Well, hello again. Hope you're doing well. My name is Joe, if you didn't know, and not too long ago on this channel, I made a little video where, among other things, I stressed the importance of regular people talking about politics more. And I figured what better way to help support that idea than to make another video about politics. This time, though, instead of talking about specific politicians or the election, I wanted to talk about a general problem with our government and how I think we can fix it pretty easily. Today I'm talking about voting reform. It's not a topic that gets brought up a lot, partially because it's not that exciting, but mostly because it's something that neither of the major political parties would benefit from. You may not realize this, but the reason why we're stuck with two major political parties is because of the way we vote. And if we could change that, if we can reform how we vote, then we can break away from a two-party system and have a much more representative democracy. Now, when I say voting reform, I should be clear, I'm not talking about redrawing districts or the Electoral College. Those things are important, but what I'm talking about is the actual system we use to vote. The one we use now is called single choice winner take all. Some people also call it first past the post, but I think that name is dumb, so I'm not going to be using it. I think winner take all describes it better, so that's what I'm going to stick with. How it works is you're given a ballot with several choices, you pick the choice that you like the most, and whichever choice gets the most votes is the one that wins. It's so simple and so obvious that if you're anything like me, you probably went most of your life without even knowing there were other ways to vote. There are, and I'm going to be going over the one that I like the most, but before I do, I think it's important to talk about why this system is so bad, and why we need to change it. Because it seems pretty good at first, and it kind of is, as long as you're only using it to choose between two things. If the choice is, do you want this law to pass, yes or no, then winner take all is the fastest and quickest way to decide that. Where you run into problems is when you have more than two choices. To see what I mean, let's look at a little example election. Let's say you're running with 4 candidates, and we'll just call them A, B, C, and D. You hold a vote, and here are the results. A gets 10% of the vote, B gets 20%, C gets 30%, and D gets 40%. In a winner-take-all system, D is declared the victor, which is terrible. I'm not sure if you noticed, but most people didn't vote for D. 60% of the citizens chose other candidates, which means a minority, less than half the people, got to pick who's in charge. That's not very democratic, is it? And the more choices you have in this system, the less democratic it gets. Run an election with 10 candidates, and one of them can win with just 11% of the vote. Because the more options you split the vote between, the less votes it takes for one person to have the most. What usually ends up happening in situations like this is that the voters who supported A, B, and C either all join together to oppose D, or they just join D, because no other option stands a chance. You end up with a two-party system, and even if a third party wanted to break in, even if one was popular enough to get a substantial portion of the votes, all that means is they split the vote 3 ways, and someone wins with less than 50%. That's why every country that has ever used single-choice winner-take-all has devolved into a two-party system. It just mathematically does not work with more. And because those two parties have to represent everyone, they will always be terrible. Because the very nature of having just two parties to represent an entire country means that over time they'll naturally form this sort of toxic codependent relationship. Like, on the one hand, the two parties have to be opposites of each other. In order to appeal to everyone, they have to have opinions on just about every topic. In order to be distinct from each other, those opinions have to be polar opposites. Which makes it seem like these two are enemies. I mean, they certainly act like it. The discourse between these two parties gets very angry very quickly. But, like two logs leaning against each other, it's that opposing force that gives them strength and stability. Anything that hurts one party supports the other and vice versa. That's a major flaw with the two-party system in general. Neither side has to be good, so long as they can convince you that the other side is worse. If it feels like you've been voting for the lesser of two evils your entire life, that's by design. Because it's easier to threaten people with evil than it is to promise them something good. Promises have to be kept in order to have any weight. If you promise something and then don't deliver on it, the voters will see that as a betrayal. But threats have power even when they aren't carried out. And in politics, you can threaten stuff on behalf of your opponent. That's what attack ads are. That's what misinformation is all about. Convince people that the other side is going to destroy the country, and simply winning the election has the appearance of accomplishing something. You can say that you prevented disaster simply by not allowing the other side to take control. It's a tactic that both parties have used quite effectively, not only because it makes their jobs easier, but because it keeps the populace divided into two angry camps that are too busy fighting each other to realize there are problems with the system. Things that need to be fixed. And side note, that's why I don't really insult people with moderate right-wing beliefs, even though I'm personally pretty left-wing. I mean, don't get me wrong, I disagree with them on almost everything. I'll defend my beliefs. And there are some people on the far right who are absolutely enemies to peace and democracy. But I realize that being mean to all conservatives, and sort of fitting into this tribal mentality of my team versus your team, just reinforces this toxic mentality that benefits the system and not us. But yeah, I digress. The point is, because of that toxic mentality, there's no reason for politicians on either side of the aisle to ever work together. If a politician's goal is just to keep their job, if all they want to do is keep raking in millions from donators while doing the least work possible, then the best possible tactic to do that is to accomplish nothing and blame the inaction on the other side. Working together takes effort. Reaching a compromise, especially as a politician, is both difficult and risky, because it involves making hard decisions about the greater good that may upset some of the people who voted for you, especially if you've convinced your voters that the people you're compromising with are pure evil. That's why the best bet is to just never compromise, to stay entirely within your party, even if you accomplish nothing. Yeah, you may not do anything that benefits your voters, the populace may suffer as a result, but you still get paid. It doesn't take any effort. Most of your voters won't know the difference. And unfortunately, it just works. I'm not sure if you're aware, but that's essentially what the Senate has been doing for the last 12 years. If you wondered why the branch of our government that's supposed to pass laws hasn't done anything substantial for more than a decade, it's because of this. It's because it's better to do nothing, let the country fail, and blame it on the other side, than it is to actually do anything. And again, this is all a byproduct of the two-party system. Now, how you solve this problem is by having multiple competitive political parties. From an election standpoint, it's fairly easy to demonize a single party and convince your voters that they're pure evil. It's a lot more difficult to do that when there are 10 parties, because then you have to convince voters that everyone is evil except for you. You could still have attack ads and misinformation, but they aren't nearly as effective when you have multiple parties to choose from. Instead, the optimal strategy to win is to simply have good policies that set you apart from everyone else. And from an actual lawmaking perspective, imagine if Congress was made up of representatives from 10 different political parties. The Democrats and the Republicans couldn't just sit around and do nothing, because the other 8 parties would go ahead without them. The only thing they'd accomplish by not working together is ensuring that they don't get a voice at the negotiation table. Multiple parties means politicians can't just rest on their laurels. They have to actually get shit done if they want to win re-election. So now we come back to voting. We need multiple parties because the two-party system sucks, But as long as we have single choice winner take all, we're only ever going to have two political parties. How do we fix this? Simple. Ranked voting. If you've never heard of it, here's how it works. When you get your ballot, instead of just picking one candidate, you get to rank them. You get a first choice, second choice, third choice, and so on. You can rank as many or as few as you want. If you still just want to pick one person, you can. You just have the option of ranking them. And as far as the actual voting process goes, that's the only difference. All you have to do as a voter is fill out a slightly different looking ballot. All the big changes happen behind the scene and how the votes are actually tabulated. To show how it works, let's bring back my example from before. Once again, we have our four options, A, B, C, and D, and when we count up everyone's first choices, we get the same result as before. A gets 10%, B is 20%, C is 30%, and D is 40%. Instead of just saying the person with the most votes wins, though, the rule with ranked voting is that you have to get more than 50% to be declared the victor. Since no one got more than 50%, what we do is eliminate the person who came in last. Candidate A only got 10% of the vote, they clearly weren't going to win, so we eliminate them from the race. Then what we do is take everyone who voted for A and give their votes to their second choice. Essentially, we're simulating what a runoff election would look like. How would people vote if we did this again, but removed A from the running? That's why the technical name for ranked voting is instant runoff voting. And as it turns out, in this example, if A wasn't around, their voters would have gone for B or C instead. We'll just go ahead and split their 10% evenly between those two candidates, and after recalculating, what we get is B has 25%, C has 35%, and D is still at 40%. We still don't have anyone over 50% though, so we just do the process again. We eliminate the new last place candidate, which is B, and give their votes to their next choice. Recalculating again, and what we end up with is C has 60%, and D still remains at 40%. Since C has made it over the 50% mark, they are declared the winner. What this does is, it ensures that the candidate with the most general support is the one that actually wins. D may have gotten 40% of the vote, but clearly the rest of the country absolutely hated them, because they didn't even rank them in their top 3. Yeah, the people who picked A or B might be a little disappointed that their favorite candidate didn't win, but at least they still got to vote for them. They got to support their candidate without causing their least favorite candidate to win in the process. And maybe you're concerned about all those D voters who lost because of this system. But I bet if we looked at who they picked second, we'd probably find that a lot of them went for C as well. Because under ranked voting, the moderate candidates are the ones that tend to do the best, since they have the most support from the most people. Which is part of what makes the system so great in the first place. Instead of picking candidates that half of us like and half of us despise, we end up with someone that almost everyone is okay with, even if it's not necessarily their favorite choice. And of course, that's on top of the main benefit of the system, which is that you can run elections with as many candidates as you want. With ranked voting, there's no fear of splitting the vote, since everyone's choices just filter down to more moderate candidates. You as a citizen can support whatever candidate you want without ever worrying that you're throwing your vote away, and third parties actually stand a chance of winning if they can bring in enough support with good ideas. Ranked voting is how you break the two-party system, how you allow for a wide variety of political views and actual choice for you at the ballot box. It's pretty great, and not only that, it would be really easy to implement. A lot of people have told me, yeah, this is a good idea, but Congress will never go for it. But we don't need Congress for this. Voting is handled at a state and local level. We're not talking about a constitutional amendment or a federal law. Your town could probably pass ranked voting. Hell, some cities and states already have. The state of Maine switched to ranked voting in 2016. If we follow their example, if we do this locally, we can enact change from the ground up without ever needing a Washington politician to sign off on it. The costs of doing it would be negligible. It's mostly a matter of reprogramming the voting machines and drawing up new ballots. Stuff that has to be done every election anyway. It is that simple. And the only people who stand to lose anything from this are the lazy politicians who are making millions off of inaction. And the best thing about all of this is if you want to make a difference, if you want to help make this a reality, all you gotta do is tell people about ranked voting. In my experience, it isn't that people dislike ranked voting, it's that they don't know it exists. It's one of those things where once you hear about it, once you understand how it works, it's kinda hard to disagree with. It's just an objectively better system that improves on everything we already have. The only real argument against it is that it's not the best alternative voting system. There are others. Germany uses this really good one called mixed member proportional, and Australia has something called the single transferable vote, both of which are probably better than ranked voting, but they're also a lot more complicated and more difficult to explain in a short YouTube video, so I didn't bring them up here. Look them up if you're interested though, because they've been implemented for years and they work astonishingly well. But I digress. The point is, if you want to see voting reform, if you want a more representative republic, if you want to see America freed from its toxic, terrible, two-party system, then all you gotta do is spread the word. Talk to people you know about voting reform. Send them this video if you want. Send them other videos. I'm not the first person on YouTube to talk about this. Do a search for ranked voting or alternative voting, and you will find a ton of them. Pick one you like, send it to someone you know, have a discussion about it. My personal favorite, done by CGP Grey, link down in the description if you want to see that one. Send it to someone. Whatever you do, just get the word out. If we can make this common knowledge, then we can get it implemented. Get enough people talking about this, and the politicians won't be able to ignore it. Not forever. Oh, and when you do implement it, one candidate per party. For the love of God, the last thing we need is 5 Democrats and 5 Republicans running against each other. That would just be... It'd be a nightmare. But... But yeah, that's it. That's all I had to say for now. Thank you for watching. Thank you for giving me your time. Good luck, and stay safe out there.